Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of my series on political ideas for A-level politics. We're going to continue looking at conservatism, and today I'm going to look at conservatism and the economy. Now, this is not as straightforward as you would first think, and actually, there's some really conflicting stuff in here. So we're going to be asking some really big questions at the end about conservative ideology when it comes to the economy. Now, the real basis, as far as I can see, in terms of conservative economy is that this belief in inequality and hierarchy. So there's no thought in conservatism that inequality is bad and should be removed, which makes it very different from liberalism and socialism, which to varying degrees look at that inequality, whether it's with liberalism and inequality of opportunity, or with socialism, whether it's inequality of outcome, and they try and do something about it. Now, the fundamentals that we've gone back to in terms of belief in human nature and the general outlook on life is different with the conservatives. They tend to be a lot more skeptical and a lot more concerned about things going forward. They don't share that kind of progressive optimism of the other two. Absolutely central to conservative ideas on the economy is property and protecting the rights of property. So because they see property as being so important, they look to protect the the ownership of land and ownership of buildings, property, houses, things like that. Now, traditionally, this is the basis of wealth of the elite. So if we go back to the time of early conservatism, the landed elite, they owned the land, they were the property owners, and therefore the party was looking after their position. Property ownership has expanded ever since, but the fundamental idea of protecting property still remains with the Conservative Party. Now, this means that they tend to favour some ideas of capitalism, but we're going to look at that. There are some conflicting stuff on this, but the different elements of conservatism look at things in different ways. So we've got this idea that there should be a hierarchy, there should be an elite, and property should be protected. It's one reason why they hate things like inheritance tax and things like that. Now, one nation conservatism supported the idea of social reform. So it's not that nothing's being done, and to help those at the bottom of society. It isn't to make them equal with those that are higher up. But the Conservatives are a bit cynical about the kind of vagaries of market forces and the impact they're going to have. This isn't, however, motivated by a desire necessarily to make everybody's life better initially. This is motivated by the desire to maintain the hierarchy and prevent the hierarchy being overthrown by people switching to more radical ideas, for example, socialism. So again, particularly if you look at the likes of Bismarck and Disraeli, who developed one nation conservatism, it was very much about keeping hierarchies in charge, but giving that degree of social reform and this idea of paternalism. So again, the hierarchy is looking after those lower down the system, like a father. Now, the new right is very different, and that has championed inequality by championing the wealth of yuppies in the 1980s, for example. So the almost celebrating excess and success, the new right would say. So we see this starting point in this acceptance that there should be inequality because some people are going to be wealthy and some people aren't. Sometimes that is mitigated a bit by this idea of paternalism, and centrally there is this idea of property ownership. Right. So do Conservatives believe in laissez-faire economics? Well, Edmund Burke in the 18th century did, and he supported the ideas of Adam Smith and free markets, and when this idea initially came out, and the new right does. So we've got two bits of conservatism with a big gap in the middle, but the two bits either end believe in laissez-faire economics. The new right has been closely linked with neoliberal economics, those of von Hayek and Morgan Friedman. And the new right does therefore support free market economics, and we see this in practice with Reaganomics in the US and Thatcherism in the UK. And generally speaking, the new right wants the state completely removed from the economy, They say the economy and free markets will generate plenty of money, and the government can take some of that in through taxes, and then it can spend it on important things like security, like the army and police, and protecting property, and that all links back. The issue we've got here is we've got a big gap in the middle. So it's difficult to say, well, the Conservatives are the party of the free market, and really liberalism is the ideology of the free market. And therefore, we've got the new right borrowing some bits of liberalism, and we've got Edmund Burke supporting Adam Smith. Again, we could think of as a liberal economist. So what happens in that middle bit? Well, in that middle bit, we talk about the Conservatives being the reluctant supporters of capitalism. They say, well, markets aren't best left alone because it's not always going to produce good stuff. So the Liberals, they say, are a bit naive in this. They look at it real kind of, oh, everything's going to be brilliant. And the Conservatives go, well, no, nothing's ever going to be brilliant. So the market isn't necessarily going to be best if left to its own devices. And so we've had two different lots of state intervention by the Conservatives. The first one, going back to traditional conservatism, is protectionism. And we see that in the 19th century. And so what they would do is they would put input taxes on goods coming into the country to protect national industries and national agriculture. And so the foreign imports that were coming in would then be priced out of the market or made less competitive in the market by these import duties, and therefore the goods made in the country or grown in the country would be cheaper than the imports. Now, there's two side effects of this. The first is it means higher prices, which are often most keenly felt by the less well-off. On the other hand, it protects their jobs. So the Conservatives was kind of looking at it and going, well, if we want to protect and use paternalism, you could argue, you want to look after the workers, then we need to make sure they have work. So we need to protect the markets. Now, the other side of it is they need to protect the capitalists, the owners of these businesses, who often the landed elite, who would also benefit hugely from having their industry protected from foreign competition. And there's a bit of nationalism in there as well, patriotism in there as well. The second form of state intervention we see in particular in the period after World War II, where we see the Conservatives also embrace Keynesian economics. This is kind of an update of paternalism, where they're seeking full employment. And again, we're seeing them very much in line, and what was called as the post-war consensus, very much in line with the Labour Party. And so they're looking after all members of society. They're doing it in a slightly different way, and they accept the welfare state, and they accept a degree of state ownership. And this is a bit of conservative pragmatism, is the argument, that they've always believed in the kind of this one nation paternalism, and the pragmatic way of doing it and not changing everything once the Labour government had made those changes in 45 is simply to continue with it, because continuation and not changing things is the Conservative way. But a post-war consensus Conservative government, therefore, is going to look very, very different to a 19th century protectionist government, which is going to look very different from a Thatcherite government that we'll see at from 1979. And it's getting quite difficult here to pin down Conservatives having a clear ideology in terms of the economy, because we've seen, well, I can see different changes as we go through. So we go from free market to protectionism to state Keynesian and welfare state and a bit of nationalisation, through to the new right and Thatcherism and Reaganomics. And where are we now in terms of this as well? I mean, we're probably largely still in the kind of Thatcherite view on economy, maybe not completely. So some debates that come out of all of this. So can you really see the Conservative governments of 45 to 79 as being truly conservative when they embraced this welfare state and state-owned industry? Well, as I said, there isn't a set view. There always has been this scepticism amongst a lot of Conservatives towards free markets. And there was before this period, and it still continues to an extent now. I mean, we for example, if we look at Trump, Trump would class himself as a conservative. Now, he he's moving back to the kind of 19th century protectionism model, moving away from Reaganomics. This one, it depends on how much you look at the kind of pragmatism and the looking at what's in front of you and what's needed in front of you in terms of conservative ideology, and how much of it you look at it, well, is there a clear-cut one on economics? Now, that kind of conservatism wouldn't really, I don't think, stand today. In fact, when we've had people suggesting to going back to that kind of amount of government intervention, and they've been the likes of Corbyn on the left of the Labour Party, and have been shouted down as being something quite radical. But equally, on the other side, the new right, I mean, in terms of economics, are they just liberals by a different name? So new right and neoliberal seem pretty much interchangeable when it comes to economic policy in terms of what they want to do with the economy. The only real difference is what the new right will spend the money on and what neoliberals will spend the money on. So the new right, again, is going back to conservative values in terms of protection, police, army, things like that, in terms of where they're prioritising spending, whilst the liberals are likely to prioritise that spending elsewhere in terms of trying to do something about equality of opportunity. So again, it looks like from the first one, the Conservatives just temporarily borrowed Labour's economics position with a little bit of adjustment, and then with the new right, they just borrowed neoliberalism's or liberalism's ideas on economics with a little bit of a twist. So this takes us to the question I posed at the bottom. So liberalism has free market economics and opportunity, and that equality of opportunity is something more championed by modern liberalism. But there's clear ideology bits in there: free markets, opportunity. Socialism has equality and collectivism. Again, very clear ideological standpoints. So they are always looking to improve equality. They believe in collective more than individualistic methods, which separates them very definitively from liberalism. But when we get to conservatism, is it the case that there is no clear economic ideology? I mean, I could find it the bit about hierarchy and inequality, and that seems to run through. But again, even that, if we're looking at conservative governments between, well, after the Labour government fall in 51, and we go 51 through to into the 70s, well, I mean, the elites do continue to dominate English politics to a high degree. But again, is that economic policy? So it's quite a tricky one, and one definitely to think about is, if you look through all of this, can you find a common thread in terms of what conservative economic ideology is? And it might well be that this idea of the reluctant supporters of capitalism is the right thing for conservatism. So they do support it, but they don't support it in that kind of wholehearted, enthusiastic way that liberals do. Right. So please remember to like, to subscribe, to comment. Thank you very much for watching. I hope I've made you think with that one, and you can develop your own ideas in terms of what you think about conservatism and the economy. Thank you for watching.